And this is very exciting because we're talking about citizen warriors engaging the world's people in the fight against climate change. How are we engaging you? How are you engaging each other? How are businesses engaging with you, with me, with you, our virtual viewers, in the fight against climate change? This is exactly what we are discussing now. How are businesses using clever, technologies, solutions to engage with us? What is a citizen warrior? Are you a citizen warrior? All these questions that are coming to my head. I think we're ready. The mics are on. Everything is on. So let's crack on. Brennan, get onto the stage right now. Brennan Spellacy, co-founder and Chief Executive Officer of Patch. Great to see you, Brennan. Scott Abrahams, Senior Vice President. Get clapping. Business Development in FinTech, UK and Ireland, International Markets, Mastercard. Toddington Harper. Shall I say Todd or Toddington? Todd, are you a Todd or Toddington guy? What? Is there a preference? Toddington it is then. Toddington it is. Toddington Harper, CEO of Gridserve. Carine de Boissezon, Chief Sustainability Officer at EDF Group. And Zanagee, co-founder, Zanagee Artis, co-founder and policy director of 0 Hour. Right. I can feel the atmosphere. I can feel the buzz in the room. I hope you're all feeling the buzz, the love, the excitement. Thankfully, I don't have to deal with anything virtual. The hearts calmed down a little bit after that, but we got there in the end, and it was a brilliant Climate Leaders Live. So this is where, lady and gentlemen, this is where I get you just to, in a minute or under a minute, just to sort of explain to us why you're here. We're at COP, we're at the Sustainable Innovation Forum. It's important. We're on this lovely Reimagine stage, final session for the Reimagine stage. Why are you here? Why do we virtually and physically care about you? Brennan, let's go from right to left.
Yeah, absolutely. What a great intro. Great hype man we have here. So the reason I'm here is Patch. I founded a company called Patch, and it's a programmatic interface to access carbon markets. More simply, it's a way to take CO2 out of the air with computers. And we work with a really wide variety of technology businesses, primarily consumer businesses, but some B2B as well, to allow them to build some sort of sustainability feature or climate action into their product. So we work with a lot of credit card companies, not Mastercard, but maybe
we might
credit,
have
Mastercard adjacent.
Do you want to do a quick pitch, like a 30-second,
that's
elevator pitch?
I don't think I need to be honest. But
And as well as a wide variety of e-commerce companies, fintechs, crypto companies as well. So that's why we're here, to help spread it out.
That's the first mention of crypto on this stage. We've had blockchain, but no one has actually mentioned the C word, the crypto word, which I'm fascinated by. But we're not going to go there, not on this panel anyway. Scott, why are you here?
The reason I'm here is to represent Mastercard and to represent Mastercard's efforts around sustainability in two ways. First of all, of course, our own commitments around net zero, etc. But probably more importantly on this panel, to talk about how influential we want to be and are being when it comes to sustainability. We've got 20,000 licensees of our products, 70 million places you can use our products, and almost 3 billion people that have in their purses and wallets and phones a payment instrument from our business. We think that that's a huge asset that we can use not only for the good of Mastercard, but in the whole sustainability agenda. And most of our customers, as you were saying on a panel earlier, are demanding those types of services now. This is not a push from us, it's a pull from them.
We're getting our money's worth from Brennan. Room in there and here and there and here. Right, Toddington.
Hi. The reason we're here is to help accelerate the delivery of sustainable energy on such a scale we can help to move the needle on climate change within the timeframes required. And the reason, how we're doing that is we're building a sun-to-wheel kind of whole energy ecosystem that's a replacement for well-to-wheel. So we're building electric vehicle charging stations, but we're also building the energy generation from solar farms to power that network. And we're also helping to lease electric vehicles to make it incredibly easy for people to use electric vehicles and to make the customer experience as fantastic as possible. The reason we're at COP is to reach out to other people around the world who also want to accelerate this transition but don't have all the solutions that we do. But yeah, we're here to try and help make a difference within the timeframes required.
And I'm looking forward to hearing about your sort of individual solutions, ideas, innovations, dreams, inspirations, everything. It's all coming our way. Carine, what about you? Why are you here?
Well, I'm the voice of my 165,000 citizen warriors, right? So they are everywhere in the world. I produce decarbonized electricity. Electricity is a solution to reach the Paris Agreement. My product has a strong pipeline, 2.5 times more electricity needed to decarbonize transport, decarbonize buildings, industry. And I want to tell my employees that they are not alone and better together.
Brilliant. Zanagee.
Yes, hello, Zanagee, Artis, policy director at 0 Hour. I'm here because young people deserve a voice on stages like these and at the UN. And so at 0 Hour, I work on climate policy in the US and pushing for climate justice through Congress. And I am also an ambassador with the Global Choices Arctic Angels Network, who are advocating for protection of the Arctic and Antarctic as global commons and places that regulate the entire global climate system. And so here, representing young people fighting for climate justice and policy.
Brilliant. Before I sort of ask you a question and how you're individually, how your companies are helping, how you're engaging with customers, how you're doing that, going about it, let's sort of talk big picture, holistically first. A sort of an underarm, as we would say in the sports vernacular, an underarm question first. A sort of a, how do we engage the world's people in the fight against climate change, whether it's harnessing younger generations, whether it's engaging citizens of all ages, from all nations, all walks of life. How do we get them to play their part? Let's go down the panel.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was actually saying this a little bit earlier where we actually have, or we're really seeing really great engagement in kind of the first two generations that are going to be materially affected by climate change, which are millennials and Gen Z already. If you kind of play this out 20, 30 years, if we don't hit our climate goals, we're going to be in a really tough spot. So it's all about kind of engaging folks who maybe are a little bit further along and trying to help them kind of understand why this is so important. And it really comes down to education in a lot of cases. This kind of, especially when we talk about things like carbon, it's a very abstract concept on it's a scentless, invisible gas, and it's unclear why some of these things are actually happening. So what we do at Patch is we spend a lot of time helping people understand why, in our particular case, removing carbon, taking CO2 out of the atmosphere is so important, and how it doesn't actually have to cost very much, or in some cases even anything, and if you're kind of, depending on how you're positioning the particular business model. So education, we spend a lot of time on education.
Yeah, that's education first one.
I think about this in a number of ways. I think when we look at what we do at Mastercard, I think the first thing you have to do is show leadership yourself.
Yeah.
Walk the talk, right? So the commitments that we have made as a business are something that are very, very core and very important to us as a business and to our employees, to the point you were just making. Then I think there's a number of other things. Once you've got that basis of trust, there's a number of other things you can do. First of all, you can educate individuals about how their activities are having an impact in a similar way to some of the things that your business does. And secondly, give them some options to do something about it. And I think it's those three things together that's our strategy as a business, and that's what many of our customers, we serve some of the oldest banks in the world, and we also serve some of the newest FinTechs in the world, many of whom are focused at those generations. We have to deliver this to all of those businesses. And so it's not just thinking about this generation or that generation, it's thinking about everybody.
Yeah, Toddington.
I think there's kind of two elements to this. I think first of all, people need to really understand and be absolutely clear about the crisis that we're walking into. We are not winning. The position at the moment is extremely bleak. I'm an extremely positive and Gridserve a very glasses half full type of organization. You have to be. And we're staring at this next decade going, you know what, there's still time to turn the situation around. What I've thought a lot about COP is that if we don't take the action, and at the moment the action is not being taken at the level that's needed, we're going to be in a situation in 10 years' time when we don't have hope. Can you imagine what it would be like to live in this world where you don't have hope? The climate crisis is happening. It's beyond change. We can say, 10 years ago we knew it, we didn't do enough, and that's what we're walking into. And people need to get that. They really need to understand that. And I think younger people intuitively do seem to understand that more. But the action, and so the next bit, first of all, really getting to grips with it, of the extent of this. This is the biggest threat that humanity has ever faced. This is the biggest responsibility ever laid on people like us living and able today to do something about it. And I think most people don't get that because we're just very busy doing it with lives. So having kind of got up across the point of how critical this is and how important in kind of engaging people, the next thing we need to do is help position and focus people on solutions.
Yeah,
marches are great, and I went to along the march and looked and saw what people were marching for and saw what people were talking out. But that's great. There's passion there, but it's not solving the carbon crisis, the climate crisis. And so we just need to focus people on what we abbreviate to one very simple word, and we use #deliver. It's up to us every single day, every single hour to fix this. And only by doing so can we turn the situation around.
Well said. And just to reiterate a stat that I mentioned earlier while we were trying to fill some time because we couldn't link up with our previous guests, Climate Action Tracker, you've probably seen the study. They've looked at all the pledges made by all the governments, and they say it just doesn't add up. They said, the quality of many of the pledges are questionable, and countries don't have short-term plans to put them on track to deliver the goal. Just wanted to remind you, which sort of backs up what you just said, Toddington. Carine.
Yeah, I think it's important to get people to understand the order of magnitude, because when you do the study, for example, we study 30,000 people in 24 countries about climate, and they think, for example, that recycling their waste is more important than stop driving their ICE. So unless people understand, and for example, in our company, we give the possibility to do your own carbon footprint. I don't know if you've done it. I'm 8.4 ton. I need to move to 2. Out of this 8.4, the government is 1.8. So my government first needs to decarbonize, right? So at the end, what I'm a bit frustrated about the COP is that we tend to oppose individuals to companies. And I think at the end of the day, we are all part of the system, right? As consumer, we have a role to play. As employee, we have a role to play. And so we have to make sure that we're not opposing, we're not de-responsibilizing either the individual or the government or the corporate.
The Australian Prime Minister, I think he said today, it's not the government's role, it's private corporations. You're a corporation. Now, I know Australia is a topical issue, and we might agree with many of the things they're doing or not doing, but was there any validity in that? Let the private sector get on with it because governments stifle with regulation. You just don't know.
No,
not at all.
No, not at all. I think we all need. It's a coalition. We cannot solve this crisis on our own. We cannot put all the responsibility on the shoulders of individuals either, right? But as I said, we are the system, all of us, and specifically in my sector, clearly you need the government to give visibility for investment. So we need all of us together.
Zanagee.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. And I think we have to be thinking about this issue as a systems issue. And governments and policymakers and business leaders have to be doing that and actually giving people choices on how to decide what they can do. And so that means offering pension funds that are focused on sustainability and don't have money in oil and gas. It means divesting banks from fossil fuels and actually giving people an opportunity to choose sustainability over continued expansion of fossil fuels. And another thing that we have to do is understand what we can all give. And anyone can be involved in the climate justice movement, and we are really emphasizing that at 0 Hour, whether you're a young person, whether you're older. This is an intergenerational movement. We as individuals make up this entire system. And so we all have something to give, and everyone on this panel has something else that they're giving to the movement, and young people and students all over the world have something to give. And so everyone in this room can decide how you want to engage and really get a specific goal. And when you have that in mind, you can do a lot, because we can think about this systems problem as this big thing, and climate change is this global issue, but you can focus on one thing that you can make a change on, and that will really help.
So true, well said. Let's get into the solutions, what you're doing individually as companies to engage customers' climate action. Let's start with Patch. How are you helping companies companies or customers engage?
Yeah, absolutely. So first and foremost, and I think I would love to build on some sentiments that were said earlier, which is there's this idea, like the idea of individual action, I think is really powerful. But I think there also needs to be an awareness with respect to both policymakers as well as corporates that they have far, far more leverage as an organization, right? You represent nearly over 150,000 people. I'm not sure how many people use electricity from EDF. It's maybe most of France. I don't know. You have far more leverage than like the average individual using that electricity, right? And they don't actually have the ability to, decide, oh, maybe I'm going to go with another electricity provider, especially in situations where it's maybe a duopoly in the case of Mastercard and Visa. And so I think there's kind of an element of that, which is like making sure, how do we minimize the number of decisions that a consumer has to make, or maybe they can make one or two, and then kind of this good behavior or good action is actually put on autopilot. And this is what we focus a lot on at Patch, which is because we're a programmatic interface. So how do you make it to say maybe you opt in one or two times, and then it's set and forget it, and it's kind of running behind the scenes. And so because we're an API that takes CO2 out of the air, we partner with FinTechs to enable them to allow their users to maybe put one setting on one time, and then every time they swipe their credit card, the kind of carbon associated with a particular transaction is sequestered from the atmosphere. We're actually, funnily enough, just going live with, for those who know the company Afterpay, a big buy now, pay later provider. They're known as ClearPay here in the UK. They're going live with their Patch integration just before Black Friday. So they're expecting to push a couple $2 billion of GMV through Afterpay, and much of that is going to actually be compensated using the Patch network. And so again, it's all about how do you opt in one time, but then you're covered for the entire usage within that particular ecosystem. So again, people have a lot going on in their lives. They have to pay rent. They have to take care of their children. There's a lot going on. How do you make it easier to do the right thing?
Yeah. Scott, what about you? How are Mastercard influencing? How do you empower customers to take action?
The first thing we do, and what we see when we talk to our customers, who are the ultimate suppliers to their customers, right? There's a step in between. The first thing that they're demanding, similar to our friends at Patch, are tell me about what the impact that my actions are having. Tell me what my footprint looks like. And that's something, so we're the first network to actually have a carbon impact score across every transaction across our network. And we're now in the midst of rolling out that scoring to every bank and financial services institution that wants to display it to their customers. And we're making real progress actually very quickly in terms of how many businesses and financial services institutions want to do that. So then it's about, well, so what, to some extent, what can I do? And we as a network, the first thing we've done is to launch the Priceless Planet Coalition, which is focused on tree planting, 100 million trees over the next 5 years. And that's something that all of our customers and their customers can use as a way of supporting some of those impacts. But I think more than anything else, what I've noticed, and particularly, unfortunately, since the start of the pandemic, is an incredible growth in the interest and desire to get involved in these things in a way that I wouldn't say existed so much before. I am here, I'm a commercial salesperson, right? I'm not a sustainability expert, as I will prove to you throughout this debate. My job is to engage our customers in things that are good for them and good for my business.
Yeah.
And this is one of, if not the leading indicator of that, I would say, at the moment.
Yeah. Toddington, what about Gridserve? How do you engage with the public?
Yeah, so just before I answer that, coming back to the point about government, it's not a case of we'll leave it to the private sector. We're all in this together. We all live on one planet.
Yeah.
And in the UK, absolutely, the support from government has been instrumental by bringing in net zero binding by 2050. That then led to the ability to bring in other laws like phasing out the sale of new petrol and diesel vehicles within 8 years from now. And that has led to the ability for us to then invest in building new charging infrastructure at a scale never delivered in the UK before. Investing huge amounts of money, incredible amounts of money, to deliver infrastructure that will just make it as easy as possible for people to make the transition to electric vehicles. And that just wouldn't have been possible without government giving this direction of travel. So I think you kind of outsource the problem to say it's not my issue. It definitely is. And in terms of what we're doing, we're building that infrastructure to make it easy, and I completely agree. You need to help give people solutions, and in our opinion, you need to provide solutions that are less expensive, ideally, than the existing solutions, and are incredibly easy. So we wrap it all together by both creating clean energy through hybrid solar farms, building sites like electric forecourts and electric hubs to consume that energy, and also leasing electric vehicles to make it extremely easy. As an example, if you lease an electric vehicle, and you can also include the energy as part of that, then the cost of using that electric vehicle, when you also take into account the comparison between petrol and diesel, can be less from day one than it would otherwise be the case. What we've also done is that everybody who leases an electric vehicle from Gridserve, we've partnered with a tree planting organization, which means we go and plant, or they plant, because they know how to plant trees, and we definitely don't, 100 trees for every single electric vehicle leased. So somebody just makes a decision, should I get an electric vehicle? Yes, I should, because obviously we should. And if everyone here hasn't got one yet, please get one today. Hopefully from us, but anyone, it counts. Get an electric vehicle. They don't have any downside, because they can say, actually, wait a second, this can cost me less than a petrol and diesel. Why wouldn't I do this today, providing you lease it? Obviously, it doesn't work for everybody, but it works for a lot of people. And wow, isn't this amazing? I've just planted 100 trees. And that's what we need to do to kind of make it easy for people. And we can help do that by delivering people the confidence to charge electric vehicles everywhere, ensuring that the energy they use is from clean energy sources and is additional, and then make it incredibly easy for people to use electric vehicles.
Well said. Well said. Carine, you've got this wonderful tool that you're deploying to your 165,000 employees.
Yes.
That's a lot of employees. Tell us about this tool.
Yes, so it's called the Climate Fresk. Actually, for those of you who have been to the Blue Zone, but also it's everywhere in Glasgow, there are 150 people deploying it. We have 18,000 employees who have been playing that game. It's a low-tech, it's cards. This is the IPCC report translated into 42 cards. You play with your employees, so about 8 people on a table, and you understand the causes and the consequences of climate change. Once you've done that, nobody can say, I didn't know, okay? So everybody understands that human activities are responsible for the crisis, and that if nothing happens, this is starvation, migration, all the lovely things that we will see, and that's linked to the eco-anxiety of the youth people. I don't know if you've seen this study that came in June. 10,000 young people, 75% of them say they are afraid of the future, 45% suffer from eco-anxiety, and 39% wonder whether they will have a child. Okay, this is what we are talking about here. So effectively, we have deployed that tool. So as I said, 18,000 of our employees have deployed it. And the beauty of it is that then you link it to your strategy. Because I spend 15 billion per annum capex investment, 1.5. I'm one of the biggest investors in terms of energy infrastructure. I need to be sure that this is not stranded assets, that I've not wasted the money, because my infrastructure, they last 100 years, hydro dams, nuclear plants, etc. In 100 years, I will be affected by climate change, right? So this is a huge responsibility that we have, and that's why I need all my employees to be my ambassadors, to be the ambassador for our clients, for their communities, and I think this low-tech tool is actually one of the best ways to make everybody in action.
Zanagee, we've got a question from the audience. Perfect timing. It's as if they knew that you were going to be the one that's going to answer it. It cites Greta, blah, blah, blah. It cites those famous... Perfect. How do you address disillusionment and cynicism of young people towards big corporations? We've got a lot of corporations here. How do you address disillusionment and cynicism of young people towards big corporations? How do you avoid the blah, 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 the Greta quote?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think that there definitely is a lot of disillusionment with large corporations who are working on sustainability, and there is so much greenwashing happening. And to talk about net zero, and for 0 Hour, we actually don't exactly support net zero for a few reasons. And for one of them,
in our pre-call, he said net zero is a false goal, which I wrote down, which I love. It's great that because there's such a focus on it. Just explain why.
Yeah. So net zero has a lot of issues, and one is that, primarily, it allows pollution to continue. And so there's options to trade carbon credits or to buy offsets that could be threatening indigenous lands or not even in locations that are actually being most harmed by climate change. So often, like mangrove trees are one example of something that is really great. Sequesters carbon, protects shorelines, but in some cases for carbon offsets, they're actually purchased in places that don't even need that kind of protection. And then it allows people to continue polluting just by paying for these offsets. And so For 0 hour, we're calling for reaching actual zero and eliminating emissions, because this idea of net zero is really, in some cases, a false promise.
And just come back to the disillusionment of the cynicism of some young people towards big corporations.
Yeah, so I think that it really comes down to what I was talking about earlier as well with choices. And so young people are really eager to see actual choices that they can make to be sustainable. When we're offered those choices, we will make them. And so we're looking for companies that are really actively working in this space and truly believe in what they're doing. And I think everyone here does. And it's
do you have like a greenwashing radar? Can I say like a BS monitor almost? Can you sense it pretty quickly?
I think hard to tell.
Right.
I think a lot of times there is so much media and PR about being green and being sustainable, and it takes a lot of research to understand what's out there. And so there is just general skepticism about that. And like we were saying earlier, it comes down to education and learning about what groups are doing, what the tangible impact in the world is, and actually being able to communicate that to people.
Yeah, please jump in. Yeah, do.
I just wanted to, excuse me. I just wanted to say something on the greenwashing point.
Yes.
And I really agree. We spend at Mastercard so much time making sure that what we're doing is led by science and has the impacts that we're saying it is. And I speak to no customer that doesn't have that almost at the top of its agenda, which I think is a problem. Because sometimes we are at risk of making the perfect be the enemy of good. And so rather than do anything, I do nothing, because I'm concerned about being accused of greenwashing, even at the nth degree. And that, you know, I talk to very large businesses across the world, not just in this country. And that I fear that sometimes can be a real concern for them.
Someone said that today. Sorry, my mind. There's so much information coming out of COP.
This is my
Someone
first
said
panel.
it's better to greenwash than do nothing.
I'm not suggesting that, clearly. What I'm suggesting is that we have to be thoughtful around that sometimes, because it can.
I'm going to find out who said it. Keep
can
talking
move
while I find it out.
towards a position of being scared about doing anything. And that, I think, is a problem.
Yeah.
Can I just
jump on
in
this,
that
please
as
do.
well?
Yeah.
Can I just jump in on that point? I kind of get it, and I think it was a very good question. And I think until people see corporations and governments attacking the climate crisis as in the same level of conviction as we, sought to address the global pandemic, then it is blah, blah, blah. This is a bigger problem. This is a bigger crisis than we've ever faced. People are marching on the streets. We talk about the climate crisis coming. It's already coming. I was pretty emotional when I went for the climate walk, and I saw people whose islands are already sinking. Who are not just kind of worried about a small rise in temperature or something happening in the future, but where am I going to live next year? Where am I live this year? And absolutely, it is blah 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 until people are addressing this with the conviction that's necessary. And the good news is that humanity is incredibly resourceful. We can fix this. We can do this. And actually, if you look at the timeframes that we addressed the global pandemic in, to be honest, I was starting to feel a little bit, glass is not quite so half full prior to that, because I thought, can humans really rise to this challenge within the timeframes required? And then within days, within weeks, the world just changed. And if we apply that same level of focus as humanity, then actually 10 years is quite a long time. And we'll be able to fix this. So I kind of get it. And I think, there are organizations like ours, we've delivered over 120 charging locations in the last 120 days. And if organizations around the world who are much bigger than ours, much more powerful, apply the same level of conviction, we'll fix it. And people will stop saying blah, blah, blah.
How many charging locations do we need? Give me like 10 years out by 2050. I mean, I've heard amazing figures. Toddington, millions. And what? Okay, what?
I think there's a lot of blah, blah, blah in that as well.
Yeah, I bet there is. Can you give us a figure?
We just need to focus on what's necessary for people to be able to use electric vehicles as easily as possible. And we need to ensure that we're providing the right level of infrastructure for the right locations to match with the, hopefully huge increase in demand for these clean vehicles too. I don't think it's about number of charge points, because there's, certain ones are, can charge a vehicle in 10 hours, certain ones can charge a vehicle in 10 minutes. And so it's not just about the number, it's about the right solutions in the right places to provide the customer experience that is just better than what we currently have.
Carine, before you jump in, I wasn't lying. I suddenly thought, was I dreaming this about someone saying this? It was the IKEA chief executive who said, greenwashing is less dangerous than silence. I'm of the strong opinion that greenwashing is less dangerous than silence. We need to bring hope to people. We need to be accountable for actions we take, and we need to tell people what we've done. In our own research, 70% of customers are deeply concerned about climate change, but only 3% are prepared to pay for environmentally friendly products. Just wanted to share that with you. Carine, jump in.
Yeah, I was just wanted to say, I think the issue we face is also what is the narrative for people? Because if we replace all the IC by electric vehicle, we're still going to have a problem in terms of limit of the planet, right? So the question is, when do we stop additionality and actually we replace? When do we install moderation as happiness? And I think this is a narrative that we haven't found yet. So it's all about more, more, more. But if you replace fossil fuel by renewables, you still have problem on resources, right? So how do we consume less? How do we innovate to do less and to make us happy with less? And I think this is the narrative that we still have to face as companies, because when you talk about moderation, sobriété, we say in French, then your executive committee is not so excited, right? So what is the business model to make us still deploy the investment that we need and yet be compatible with the planet resources?
The English don't do sobriety.
No, that's why I said moderation.
We don't do moderation, do we? We've got another question which I'm going to give to Brennan and Zanagee. You keep getting all the questions, which is brilliant. Brennan, we'll start with you. How do we help, by the way, love the questions, keep them coming, please, go on the app. How do we help consumers understand what's real sustainability and having a real impact and what's just greenwashing, which we've touched on? There's so much misinformation out there. It can be confusing. I'm wondering if Patch or Mastercard, let's all answer this, can have the tools to fix this.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm from the States, so I'm not sure if I'm really I'm going to solve the misinformation problem. I think the last 4 years have been tough for us, I think.
Yeah.
That being said, greenwashing, I think, on average, is actually getting used as a little bit of a blanket term, where a lot of people are really focused on getting to pure zero emissions by a particular date. The problem, though, is that if you read the latest IPCC report, there is no path to do that without gigaton scale carbon removal. And so there's only 3 or 4 major kind of levers we can pull, whether it's polluting less or taking CO2 out of the air. But there's a lot of, there's not quite as much yes and as we need to see, where there is no silver bullet to the solution, just like we were talking about, if you moved all to electric vehicles. And so I think there's a bit of, there's not going to be one perfect solution. I think that's kind of really important to kind of understand. I think if you kind of drive that single point home and then break down and surface information to consumers, but in a synthesized way where it's 2, 3 bullet points tops, you can get to a really good spot. But at the end of the day, it's a lot of really complex science behind the scenes, which is why I'm of the opinion a lot of this onus really falls again on policymakers and businesses, because not everyone has time to break down and become a climate scientist. Yeah. It's not a reasonable expectation of people. People don't understand how PCI compliance works either, but they still trust that their identity is not going to get stolen when they put their credit card on an e-commerce site. Mastercard solves that for you. And so, again, a lot of this responsibility, I think, although consumers are important, it's going to fall on higher leverage integration points.
And I'll come down the panel once Zanagee's answered this question about how do we help consumers understand what's real sustainability and having a real impact and what's just greenwashing. We'll come to policy, but answer that first, please.
Yeah, so I think that, like I was saying earlier, it is a lot of background and understanding that you will have to do some deeper digging to understand it. But one area that we talk about a lot at Zero Hour is fossil fuel finance. And this is an area that I think is perhaps one of the easiest areas to understand what groups are doing. And we are organizing with a coalition called Stop the Money Pipeline and organizing against JP Morgan Chase and BlackRock, who are 2 of the biggest investors in fossil fuels.
We had a JP Morgan Chase representative actually yesterday, and there was a feisty debate between MSCI and JP Morgan about decarbonization of their portfolios.
And it's a big issue for a lot of people all around the world, because they are putting billions of dollars into oil and gas every year. And yet they have their sustainable investment portfolios and they're working on sustainability. And then in the US, they are the biggest contributor to the Enbridge Line 3 pipeline, which is going to bring tar sands oil from Canada to the United States. And we don't need tar sands oil. This pipeline crosses indigenous Anishinaabe treaty territory, crosses the Mississippi headwaters, which is one of our biggest rivers in the United States. And we know that pipelines spill. And yet these companies, these banks are claiming sustainability and yet also continuing fossil fuel expansion. And this is a pipeline that is a replacement project. And the previous one was constructed in 1960. And so it's been 60 years, and now they've just funded another pipeline. And how long will that be? Is that going to be a stranded asset? And we know that that is greenwashing, to say that you're investing in sustainability, but then also continuing work in expanding oil and gas.
Yeah, policies. Well said. Not everyone gets a clap, Zanagee. You're doing a good job. Policies, what do we need? Give us one each, sort of.
Well, I mean, I'm sure it's a cliche, but we need to price the externalities. I mean, so we need the carbon price, the biodiversity, because otherwise, companies, they need to project their investment having the right investment signal. We are not an NGO, so we have to pay our 165,000 employees, right? So if you have the right price of carbon, the right impact on land use, and just transition, what I call just transition, how you treat your community, do you pay your taxes? So if you price all of this, then you should be making the right decision making, and so governments are very important. The Mark Carine 133 trillion that needs to be put at work has to be done with integrity, and that's where we need the government to step up.
Yeah, Toddington, policy.
I think the whole thing's just quite difficult. I think there are obvious cases of greenwash, and then there are also other cases of people trying to do the right thing but going about it the wrong way. I mentioned we don't plant trees, we pay a company to plant trees, because if I went and planted a bunch of trees tomorrow, the trees might not be around, they might be the wrong ones, the wrong places. I might feel really good about life because I've planted some trees, but actually I haven't done any good at all. So there's clearly a lot of education that's important. The other point that you raised around net zero, it's a tricky one. I mean, we agree, we want to get to zero carbon, but it's just not realistic. We think that no one will ever burn a piece of fossil fuel, anywhere, and therefore you kind of need net zero if you're actually going to solve the problem, which is what we're trying to do. But we agree, it's difficult, it's tricky. I do definitely agree in terms of the wider policy that we just need to take into account, what is the cost, what is the actual cost of inaction, and how do we price that? At the moment, for example, I learned the other day, it's just absolutely awful that we are chopping down in the Amazon 5 football pitches equivalent of forest every minute.
Yeah.
And that's 7,500 or so football pitches every single day.
Bloomberg has it's almost like a dial of that exact stat.
People must be out there going, how quickly can I chop this down?
Yeah.
And you can't just plant more rainforest. It doesn't kind of work like that. And so we need to make the economics work. It needs to be more economically attractive for people, probably the same people that are chopping them down, to actually stop chopping them down and protect those trees, knowing that the livelihood has been turned around. And to do that, if there is a real economic benefit, which there clearly is, about having forests and retaining rainforests and retaining carbon sinks, then we need to, actually put a value on that, and we need to place that value on the people, towards the incentive that they currently don't have, to turn it around. It's tricky, it's extremely difficult, but we really need to value, the costs of inaction and put a price on that to kind of level the playing field.
Policy.
Not so much a policy, more I think both the public and private sector, and it comes back to some of the points we were making earlier.
Yeah.
We're so focused in our lives, particularly in Europe, on our own personal data, for instance. I think all sectors can do a lot more to provide auditable data of the impacts that we are having as a business, and we are claiming we are doing on behalf of others as well, whether it's tree planting, to your point, we use partners who guarantee the trees are going in the right place and they're there for years and they're guarded and they're looked after, etc. That's how we build trust, isn't it? Rather than throwing seeds at the ground somewhere and hoping. And I think for us, when I talk to all of these businesses I talk to, that's what their consumers are demanding. Guarantee to me that what you're telling me is happening somewhere. And I think that is so important to energize consumers and citizens in a way that they haven't been before, because they don't have that trust so much.
Brennan.
Yeah, I mean, from a policy perspective, I think we've seen a playbook that works really well before with renewable energy and electric vehicles. I mean, in the States, back in the 70s, renewable energy was, I think, three orders of magnitude per kilowatt hour more expensive than fossil fuels. Now, it's less expensive to go with solar or wind, at least in some places in California, than it is to go with natural gas. And the way they got there was through government incentives, through actually giving tax refunds or tax credits towards companies that were developing these projects. We're already kind of just seeing that in the US with 45Q, which gives you $75 for every ton of carbon you actually put under the ground. And I'm of the opinion we need to kind of take this a degree further. If you look at kind of the abatement associated with transitioning from a fossil fuel vehicle to an electric vehicle in the US at least, the US government's paying nearly $400 per ton if you actually net out like the carbon intensity of the grid and actually understand what that transition looks like. So there's a world where we could be paying $200 or $300 per ton for every ton put under the ground. And most times it costs $200. So you're in the money in that case.
I like to give our panelists a chance just to have a final call to action, inspire us, just tie it all up in a lovely bow. We've actually run over. We're going to do it. I'm the time, please. I get to decide. Do 10, 15 seconds each, final sentence to rally us out of the room, because this has been a brilliant panel. Zanagee.
Yeah, so I'll just say when I founded Zero Hour in 2017, I did not have the ability to vote. And that is a huge thing that everyone can do. If you have the ability to vote, local elections, state elections, your national elections, and make sure you follow up with those elected officials, make sure that they're actually acting on climate justice, and of course, look into details about everything about your consumer practices, where you bank, where you buy, and all of that. And everyone can make a difference, so really hone in on what you want to do and take action.
Well said, Carine.
Yeah, I come back to what I said. Let's, taught to be happy with enough and not more.
Beautiful. Toddington.
I think just to kind of reiterate the point that the actual reason that we're all here is that the future of life on this planet as we know it is at stake. And it has fallen on us, you, me, everyone living and able today, but not the next generation because we don't have time to turn the situation around. This is on our watch, and fortunately the solutions are within our reach. If people actually just make the choice to actually deliver what's necessary, and mankind has that ability, we just need to rise to that challenge. And I guess just the leaving statement for me is that if everybody else, everybody here, I'm sure we're talking to people who are already at COP, just kind of makes that choice and talks to other people to actually make the choice to deliver, then we have a chance. And it's a chance that we absolutely must take.
Well said. Scott.
I think as consumers and citizens, we all use financial services products. We should demand more and think more about what our actions are taking and think about who we choose to do business with.
Yeah. Brennan, last words.
My last word will be, this is a very select group of folks at either SIF, COP, etc. There are a lot of people out here or in the world that don't feel this way, or maybe aren't in the same kind of financial or physical position to make the same choices we're making. So keep that in mind when you're building the solutions and make it easy for folks to do the right thing.
I think you'll all agree that was fantastic. Thank you.